Hi, I'm Michelle, and this is The Other Side of Misery, a space where I think out loud about life, making meaning, staying curious, refusing to flatten experiences into binaries. Let's begin. Ironically, beginnings are hard for me, tricky, maze-like, and circular. I feel like I need them, and yet I struggle to find them. I spend so long looking for a beginning, for a thread to pull to show you this right here is how the sweater began. I just make myself dizzy looking and fatigued and slightly headachy. I stick my tail in between my legs and go cope with that overwhelm that I've created through social media scrolls or deep breathing, or honestly, probably a bath. I was thinking of starting to write for my Substack today for the first time. And because it is a first time, I had to start at the beginning. You might see the dilemma unfolding here, perhaps. I've had a lot of peripheral people in my life. These new people who kind of just graze the surface of me tell me that I should write something lately. 1 to 5 people is one thing, but 20 plus people in a short period of time, suddenly, all at once, telling me I should write something. I don't know. I think I'd be silly to ignore that. Is it the universe pushing me to do what I've been too scared to do on my own? I have no idea. But I have always loved to write. Is this the beginning? I've always been scared to write. Is that then the middle? But look at me now. The end? I was thinking of starting to write in my Substack today, but about what? I struggle with a few things beyond the whole beginning thing that I've already kind of complained about. I struggle with writing into a void. Text me and I'll write you a novel about my thoughts. Call me and I'll give you a personal podcast. But stick me in a quiet room with no one around in front of a microphone and a computer, and I sound like a different version of myself. Some robotic humanoid version that forgot basic syntax and has never had the ability to make a compelling point in their entire existence. I also think I struggle with vulnerability standing before this void. To a person, I can bare my soul, but to these empty spaces that exist, I'm hollow, a magician's hat that all at once contains no doves. So, beginnings. I wanted to write about my work at first, about my research, because we live in a world that values facts and evidence and qualifications above most everything else. So I wanted to prove my voice to you through figures and diagrams. But even there, where does one begin? Do I start chronologically with my first research experience, where I'm at now, who I am? Do I define eudaimonia, however you want to pronounce it? That alone can be a whole entry. So note to self, write a whole entry on eudaimonia. It's history, philosophy, psychology, what it feels like to me. I think that'll be compelling. Do I start a little ahead and assume my reader or listener knows how to Google eudaimonia? But I don't know. With that, I feel a sense of loss almost, because I want to share my thoughts and feelings with you on these topics. I don't want you to just get information. You can Google anything. This is not a place to get information. This is a place to connect. And I want to share more than just information. I want to get that experience of connecting with you and sharing with you on the topics that I love so much. But there are a lot of topics I love so much, and I am impatient. Oh, maybe if I make a list for you, then you know where we might be going with this, and I won't feel so lost. Maybe that helps. All right, so maybe this is a thread in the sweater. Maybe not the first thread, but a thread. So we're going to talk about eudaimonia, hedonia, about Aristotle and Nietzsche, and most definitely other philosophers too. probably about positive psychology and social psychology and clinical and counseling psychology and neuroscience, and about Freud and Jung and Rogers and Yalom, and definitely many other psychologists too, about lingo and language in psychology and therapy, about different types of therapies like RCT and CBT and DBT and EFT and MCT, what they are, what they look at, what I think. We'll talk about PhDs and about the academy and research, definitely about art and dance and poetry and symbolism and myths from all around the world, about somatic experiences and relationships and chronic illness and indigenous perspectives and trauma and grief and meaning and identity, about tarot cards and spiritualism, about traveling and eating and feelings and thoughts, about plants and rocks and history. It's all so deeply interwoven that maybe you can see how it's hard to find a beginning in this tapestry of everything that exists. But let's begin with this beginning. I love to write, and always have. And yet, I have hardly ever properly done it. I believe the stereotype we as a society tell ourselves about writing, about this creative process, that it's hard, that it's a labor. Athena being born from the mind of Zeus. Like, imagine that. Giving birth through your head after a terrible headache. And maybe it is that way for some people, but maybe it doesn't have to be that way for everyone. Maybe for others, it's kind of this cosplay or self-fulfilling prophecy where we learned that creating is a labor. It's this thing that drives writers and poets to drink themselves to death. This thing that isolates you and takes discipline. And yeah, that sounds daunting and not particularly fun. I think writing hasn't happened for me partially because of that aversion towards this heaviness that seems tacked on to writing. I'm also a firm believer in writing our own scripts. So if the script of what it looks like to be a writer doesn't fit, instead of avoiding writing, maybe I just have to change the script. I think writing hasn't happened for me partially because I am a perfectionistic person. And writing is fundamentally not a perfectionistic sport. There is no perfect line. We can work and rework a sentence, edit and rewrite forever. What makes something done? What makes something the perfect sentence completed? Is it grammar, vocabulary, imagery, impact, concision, length, humor? Maybe for each writer, that's a question that we have to answer for ourselves. But for this writer, me, I think I am opting for authenticity. So yeah, it's going to be raw and unedited, often rambly and winding and lived, mostly. Maybe there's something kind of precious about that transparency. You see, little me loved to read as much as she loved to write. To middle school Michelle, books were magical. Because across all time and space, I was able to pick up an object and be connected to a person I had never met before. Yes, the stories would transport you to other worlds that don't even exist outside of a person's mind, and that too is magic. But for little me, the true magic of reading was that I was reading another person's words in whatever format they fell, and in that way I was connecting with a human being on the other end of a telephone. I would write in the margins of my books, talking to writers who had long since died, laughing at their word choices with them, giving commentary, asking questions, letting them know how much it meant to me to read that they too thought the things I thought about, and that neither of us were alone in that moment. Talk about feeling stuck about beginnings. I find myself now wanting to tell you all about how little me didn't believe in linear time, that it felt quite intuitive that all things that had happened and would happen were still actively and forever existing. I kind of imagined it like a long, dark room with each moment of existence as a photograph suspended in the air, one after the other in consecutive order. So if we were to walk at a certain pace through that room, we would just see life play out like a flip book animation. But just because we walked to the next picture in the series didn't mean that the future pictures or the past pictures ceased to exist. They would forever hang suspended there. So for little me, reading was kind of this way to fold the loop, to collapse it so that the picture of Edgar Allan Poe writing The Raven and me in 5th grade hearing that poem in my English class for the first time kind of folded in on themselves and were next to each other instead of decades apart. I'll definitely talk more about this in the future in our chats here. I guess maybe the last thing I want to share with you today about stories is the beginning of my love for stories, or I guess one of the many beginnings. But this beginning is the one that scared me the most, so I think it makes sense to share it with you now. I was probably about 10 years old in 4th grade in my social studies class where we were learning about the bubonic plague. Our teacher was this amazing older guy with a large mustache, and he wore these golf shirts every day and drove a bright red Mini Cooper to school. And he made everyone in the school laugh all the time. For the sake of the story, let's call him Mr. R. So Mr. R was like that guy, the kind of teacher that you might have had at your school too, if you were lucky like me. The guy whose entire class was just this one long comedy set, and your sides would be aching from laughter, and you and your friends were in tears. Basically, he's not a serious, solemn kind of man, just a giant goofball. Again, let me draw your attention to the fact that this adult man chose to drive a bright red Mini Cooper to his job every day as an elementary school social studies teacher, knowing that all of his students would see him. So at some point, we got this assignment to write a series of letters to a family member as if we were living through the bubonic plague. We had a word bank with important concepts and dates that we were required to include in our letters to demonstrate that we actually knew what the bubonic plague was, and obviously to be graded for our ability to follow instructions. The day the assignment was due, we all came to class with our tea-stained papers that our mothers had clearly helped us burn the edges of, these stapled together packets of elementary school magic. We turned in our assignments and forgot about them. Who knows how long later, because how long does it take to grade these things? I have no idea. A week? A month? I was 10. I have no idea. But Mr. R was dismissing class for recess, and he kind of quietly and subtly asked me to stay after class to talk with him for a moment. Me, being this chronic goody two-shoes, petrified of making a single mistake person and being scolded for it, I just instantly became nervous. Like, what had I done wrong? I'm being asked to stay after class. Even thinking about it now, I get a little bit nervous. Like, my body's like, oh God. But the class kind of clamored out to run outside into this muggy South Florida moisture. And I packed up my backpack and slowly turned to walk towards Mr. R's desk along kind of this back side of the classroom. He was already sitting down there. He had a lamp lit and shining like a spotlight on his desk. I remember vividly that I had never been over there before. I'd never seen this side of his desk. And in all honesty, he rarely sat down at his desk, so I don't think I'd really seen him over there either. He opened a filing cabinet to his right as I stood beside him at his left. And he pulled out my assignment, holding it with both of his hands on his desk under this spotlight. I remember not being afraid anymore at this point. I remember feeling more like an anticipation, not like a questioning type of anticipation, but more like holding my breath. Maybe he was holding his too. He didn't look up at me, but facing my assignment, he asked me if I had any help writing it. I remember being kind of confused by this question. Like, help? Did he imply that someone would do this for me? Like, why? It didn't really make sense to me. Who would help me with this? Now, looking back on it, I realized that sometimes kids get help from their parents. But my parents were immigrants who struggled with English, one of whom never really finished the 9th grade. I was the oldest child and the first one born in America, busy editing my parents' emails for grammar and spelling. So I guess it makes sense that little me wondered who could have possibly helped me write this. Who would have even had the time? I must have looked or sounded surprised because all I said was this knee-jerk reaction of a no, and Mr. R didn't push it. But he started to cry. He still wasn't looking at me, but one of his hands left the assignment that he was holding and went up to wipe his eyes under his glasses. And he said some things to me that I can't remember exactly all these decades later. I remember the gist, and I remember the way it felt. Maybe I left my body for a moment there. It's interesting looking back how clearly I can close my eyes and see his classroom and see the layout of that moment, where I stood, where he sat, the filing cabinet, all of it, his desk messy with teacher things. And the words evade me. He basically said he couldn't believe that the words I wrote came from me, that they were filled with so much pain and complexity and nuance and something kind of real and devastating. He said it felt like he was actually reading a series of letters of someone who was living through the bubonic plague, and that it broke his heart to read. He said it felt real. He said that he loved it. And then he looked at me for the first time and asked me if he could keep the assignment, with tears in his eyes. He explained that he would pass back all of our assignments at the end of our next class, but would I mind giving it back to him after that class so that he could keep it? In that moment, in an elated kind of way, I didn't think, I just reacted and said yes. Though now, as an adult, I really wish I had a copy of whatever it was that I wrote that brought Mr. R to tears. But yeah, I said yes and kind of bounced like a pinball out of the room and out to recess, floating on some high I never felt before. With my limited 10-year-old emotional awareness at the time, I kind of just knew that I felt good, happy, wow, energized. But with some adult reflection, I think what I really felt was powerful. I was in a bit of shock that something I wrote, or more specifically, something I created out of nothing, something I made and brought into existence, had the ability to transform the funniest, most unserious man I had ever met into a man whose voice took on kind of sacred, intense solemnity as he let tears freely fall in front of me. It didn't even just transform him, but the room too. That used to feel like a comedy stage, light and fun. It felt weighted. It felt like the moment you take a deep breath in before you enter a holy temple. There was gravity,
I guess I was in shock that whatever I'd created was something that he wanted also. He wanted to keep it, to have it. I made something that someone wanted. But maybe the most impactful part of all of it, I was kind of shocked that I had made something that had this ability to make this man feel, and to feel so deeply and intensely. I gave someone a big feeling. I discovered that day at 10 years old that I had this power, this ability to reach across the space between two people with nothing but words on tea-stained paper and make someone feel something, to move them, to break them open, to touch them in a place they didn't know could be reached. I've reflected on that story often as an adult, wondering why I never really wrote again after that day, outside of birthday cards, especially when it felt so good to know that I had that power within me, this ability to make someone feel. I'd say I was scared, perhaps, all that pressure of what if I tried to do it again and couldn't? I'd stumbled upon this magical power of mine by accident. I didn't intend to make Mr. R cry or to feel such depths of despair, beauty, to touch him. But I loved that I did it. And if I tried again and failed, what then? The stakes were too high and failure seemed crushing. I couldn't risk the pain of realizing this magical moment had been a fluke. So I hid. For 20 years, I hid. I filed this away inside my own internal filing cabinet. But it didn't really go away. I mean, I did still write. I just never shared it with anyone. Scared to have that final judgment in someone else's response. Did I make them feel? Did I touch them? But that part of me was there and it waited, and I think it was hungry. It waited for me to be ready to believe in what Mr. R saw in me that day, that I could make people feel, that I had something to say, that my words could reach across the void and make someone feel less alone, more connected. 20 years later, here I am, finally letting myself remember, finally letting myself write again, finally not hiding, taking this leap, not just birthday cards, but the real thing, the vulnerable thing, the thing that Mr. R kept in his filing cabinet all those years ago. I wish I could tell you what exactly changed or when. I'll gladly tell you my theories on this one day. But I stopped hiding. I made a choice from one moment to the next that whatever thoughts and feelings I had, I would no longer dilute them or hide them. I would speak and write and actually try. Not try with that painful, daunting effort that I mentioned before in the beginning, but try in putting myself out there. Try in trying. Try in doing. So that was one of many beginnings. And this right here with you, right now, is another. Thanks for being here with me today. If you want more of this, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at The Other Side of Misery. If you want to read along, I publish essays and transcripts from the show on Substack, which you can find on my website, theothersideofmisery.com. If you want to chat, if you have questions, write to me through the website or at theothersideofmisery@gmail.com. A rating or a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify helps this reach the people who are looking for it. So thank you for doing that if you feel moved to do so. New episodes drop every Wednesday. For those who lean in, I'll see you next week. Hi. The hi part is always weird for me. I can't get it right. Every single time starting a podcast is hard. Well, not every single time, right? This will probably be episode 2, but I've recorded many to get to episode 2.
All right. Good. We got the bloopers sorted. Hi, I'm Michelle. This is the other side of misery. What is happening? Let's try that again. Hi, I'm Michelle. Blah, blah, blah. I don't know why the beginning is so hard. I literally could just start talking, but I have to do the intro spiel. It must be done. Hi, I'm Michelle. Ugh, every single time. One day it'll be easy. Has to be hard. Okay. Okay. Take 2. Episode 2? I always record these so late at night. It's nearing midnight. On a school night, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Hi, I'm Michelle. God, I hate the hellos. Okay. Hi, I'm Michelle. I have a cat, and my microphone is covered in cat hair. It's fabulous. Hi, I'm Michelle. Oh,